So I'd like to welcome our two members that are presenting tonight. David Wilk is Assistant Professor of Finance and Director of the Real Estate Program at Temple University Fox School of Business. He has over 30 years of real estate teaching experience between University of Delaware, Johns Hopkins Carey Business School, and Georgetown University. He's the chairman of the board of directors of Friends of Hockessin Colored School number 107. Fran O'Malley is with the Institute for Public Administration, Biden School of Public Policy and Administration, and director of the Democracy Project. And they will be presenting more about their Friends of Hockessin Colored Schools number 107 with history and the present and plans for the future. So I'm very excited to hear more about it.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for us to be here with everyone. And thank you so much for the kind invitation. And Sue, you're already on our slate of courses to be taught at the school when we open up again, because we would love to have a partnership with Westminster and your committee and your members. And isn't it funny how 2018 to today, how relevant and how the stars have aligned for having these type of discussions. And that's the heart and soul of what our mission is as all volunteers. Myself personally, my journey with the school started 8 years ago, and I'm one of the junior people. So so we have a wonderful board, and it's really a pleasure to tell our story. And as the world continues to exhibit all the things that we're seeing around us, the importance of our mission and the impact of our work has become even more important and more exciting. So thank you. And I'd like to also welcome Fran O'Malley. What the greatest thing about this whole journey is that we are just having so many connections coming out of what we're doing, and they're just serendipity. You've all heard of serendipity, but it's the most beautiful serendipity that I've experienced in my life. And in that we have just gathered a cluster of friends and partners and supporters and passionate individuals like yourselves who are just interested in contributing as much as we can. And so it's really been one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my career. And I've done some really cool things over the years. And so that kind of context is what we'll talk about tonight. And we're incredibly fortunate. Fran and I met when Fran, why don't you describe? I got an email from you out of the blue one day, and this is a great serendipity story.
Yeah, so I've been interested in the story for quite some time, and I'll tell a little bit more about it as we go on. But I like Sandy. I think you said you live close to the school.
Yes,
I do as well, and I can't tell you how many times I've driven over to Rita's to get a water ice. Driven past that school, knew its importance, and just was, mind boggled that Delaware'S knew nothing about it. People who live 2 blocks away have no clue the significance of the story behind that building. And the other thing that really concerned me, I read a couple of years ago where they were trying to prevent developers from taking over the property. David, you can correct me here anywhere you want to, but if my memory is incorrect. But and I was very nervous because I've been doing, as a teacher, been doing quite a bit of work in terms of trying to communicate Black history, and over the years, and I've seen scenarios like Thomas Garrett's home in Wilmington where it's disappeared from the map, and here's a incredible historic site, and all that's left there is a marker, and I was really interested in not letting that happen. So I reached out a couple times, and not to David, but to others on the board, And finally, David, I was fortunate, he reached back to me, and that's how kind of we got connected with this. And if you want me to start sharing my screen, I can. David, is that okay at this point in time? Because it can segue right into
Sure. I think if it's okay, what we would like to do is talk to you a little bit about, and Fran's being very, very, very humble, but Fran's a history teacher for 30 or 40 years, and he actually has written lesson plans about the Bulah and case and about Lewis Redding and about the history of the school that are in the Delaware archives. And he sent me a link in the original email that where he made contact, and I opened this link and I said, holy cow, this is incredible. How much work and what a life's passion this has been for Fran. And we were able to meet and introduce him to the board, and Fran's now a member of our board instantly. But what happened along the way was, it's just incredible. To Fran's point, the one thing I can tell you is 99%, maybe even more, of the people that we talk to the school about, have no idea what happened, and Delawareans. And so that was really interesting. And at the same time, I thought what we would do is kind of talk a little bit about the wonderful work that Fran has done on the history, and then kind of talk to you about what our plans are, a little bit of a story of the school. And Fran, I'll just share my screen for 1 second.
Sure. Go ahead.
And then, so kind of do a little bit of background on the school and our mission, then Fran go into the history, and then we can kind of go to the future, present and future, to kind of where we're going and where this is all leading as well. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. So, and I'll be kind of fast, and then we'll leave time for Q&A. So for those of you that haven't been to our website, we have a brand new website, www.Hockessin Colored School 107.org. And here's the real interesting part of our journey. We started in 2012, 2013 because the property was about to go to sheriff's sale for mechanics liens due to the Hockessin Community Center trying to do an addition to the property and basically running out of money before they ever started construction. But having
David, you're muted. And we lost your screen share also, bud.
Sorry. Okay.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened, but so I'll reshare again. But in 2012, 2013, Judge Leonard Williams, Tony Allen, Chief Justice DJ Josh Martin, and a number of other, Dick Christopher, Fred Sears, a number of individuals got together, and through the Delaware Community Foundation, where Fred Sears was the president or chairman, and raised enough money to buy the mechanics liens from the property. And basically in 2012, our group saved the property from sheriff's sale. And the biggest challenge that we ran into was that we took a long time to figure out what to do with the property. What could we possibly do with it? And that's really where the secret sauce came in 2019. We basically realized, and this was one of our findings from doing a lot of due diligence, and that was
think David's connection is pushed to the limit just to
Yeah, it
have
looks like
voice and screen. He might do better to shut off his screen, and then we could at least have his voice.
Yeah, I just realized that my internet wasn't on and that I had turned it off earlier, so we should be good now. Okay, I was using my data or my LTE, so I apologize. But what we discovered was we couldn't just take the school, raise a lot of money and renovate it and turn it into a museum, because the museum was only going to be a one and done type of outcome where we wouldn't really be able to have the impact that we were looking for. And so we took a long time to be able to get to the point where we realized that we had to find that it. What was the programming that was really going to drive the future of the school? And that's where we came up with, to Sue's point earlier, in the fourth quarter of 2019, I brought this idea to the board of turning it into a center for diversity, inclusion, and social equity. And we finally said, aha, we have it. This is what we need to do. And it seemed to be perfect given the history of the school. And then 2020 hit and George Floyd hit. And we thought, to Sue's point earlier, this is as timely as it can get after all the years of wandering in the desert, a little bit like Moses trying to get to the promised land. We realized after 8 years that we had found our promised land at the school, which was creating the center. And so I'll give you some insight into kind of where we are and where we're going, but the whole inspiration behind the center is teaching people and creating awareness about the story of what happened there. And that's where we have the gift of Fran O'Malley. So Fran, if you want to share your screen and just kind of show us that magic, that would be great.
Never heard myself referred to as magic before, David. All right,
I
so
doubt that.
I'm gonna jump right into this, and a lot of this is grounded, number one, in a lot of primary source research in Delaware, frequent visits to Delaware Public Archives, and even though, and a lot of it comes from the lesson that I wrote for the state of Delaware, that's now become part of the Delaware recommended curriculum. So I call this A Tale of Two Schools in Delaware and a 6-year-old student, and because that's what it involves. A lot of my work involves work around equity. Nationally, I do this work. In Delaware, I'm part of the Reading Consortium that's trying to improve schools in the city of Wilmington. And for years, especially because I taught middle and high school, I taught at Padua Academy for a number of years, and then I taught at Tally Middle School in the Brandywine School District. And because large numbers of students that I taught were minority students, I really recognized the need to make sure that they saw themselves in what they were learning. And so that really motivated a lot of what I did. So, and I don't honestly know exactly what it is that triggered my interest in this initially, but I did read 2 books, Simple Justice, which is a great book by Richard Kluger. It's pretty old. It goes back to the 70s. And then Brett Gadsden, who graduated from Concord High School, wrote Between North and South. And in both of these books, they have information about the Bulah story. And based upon that secondary, dive, I then was able to go to Delaware Public Archives, reached out to Tom Summers, who was the education coordinator down there. And I said, Tom, I want to write a lesson on this Bulah story. And he said, well, I have a folder down here. And so much of what you're going to see here comes from that folder that's available in the Delaware Public Archives. But also I went beyond that, and some of it's based upon the transcripts from the court cases. So a number of years ago when I was doing my doctoral program, I did it on history education and historical thinking, and how historians think differently than students, and the efforts in classrooms should be around trying to bridge that gap between how students think about history versus how actual historians do. And I read an article by a British researcher called Peter Schmidt, and he brought this idea to my attention of what he called ghosts in the curriculum. And ghosts in the curriculum are people who are marginalized to the extent that they don't even appear. And so what I wanted to do with a number of stories, including, number of stories, some of them are actually escaping my mind right now. But right now I'm thinking about George White. I don't know if you ever heard of George White. There's a marker over at by Greenbank. He's the only documented, as I understand, documented story of a Black man being lynched in the state of Delaware, and another story that people don't know about. But what I wanted to do was not only to make the key actors in this story visible and no longer ghosts, but also the people who have survived and are part of the board and frequently attend events that occur at Hockessin School number 107C. And they're at the bottom. I mean, these are people who actively participate in a number of our presentations. And it's interesting that they tell firsthand accounts of what life was like back at that time. So this lesson that I'm going to sort of share pieces of you with is now part of the 7th grade Delaware recommended curriculum. And even though the lesson is there and it's recommended for teaching, it's still sad. I hear so many 7th grade students telling me that they never heard of this before. So we've got a lot of work to do, but it's our mission to make sure it happens. So the story begins in October of 1950. And so let's begin the whole process here. It begins with a letter, all right? And this letter is at Delaware Public Archives. I personally think it should be showcased everywhere. It's monumentally significant in terms of the history of desegregation, both in the state of Delaware as well as nationally. And it might be difficult to see, so I'm going to read it real quickly for you. But if you don't need the reading, feel free to interject at any point in time. The date is October 3rd, 1950, Hockessin, Delaware. It's sent to the governor's office. Dear Governor Carvel, Dover, Delaware. Dear Governor, I am writing you in regards to the problem of transportation for my daughter, age 6, to and from school. My home is on the Limestone Road near Valley, over 2 miles from the school. A school bus passes by my door picking up children, but so far I have been unable to get the driver to pick up mine. The bus driver told me to get in touch with me or Mr. Eisenberg of Dover, who was in charge of the bus. I wrote him on September 19th, but have not heard from him to date. We are citizens and taxpayers of the state of Delaware and would appreciate anything you can do to adjust this matter. Will you please give this problem your personal attention? Very truly yours. Notice at the bottom, Mr. and Mrs. Fred Bulah. Phone number is 3 digits, 1950, Hockessin, Delaware. Okay. So what I find notable about this letter are 2 things. Number one, it was sent on October 3rd from Hockessin and arrived on October 4th, the next day in Dover, the governor's office. And I don't think they had Prime, Amazon Prime back then, but I think it's pretty remarkable that they were able to get a letter that quickly. The other thing that is notable about this letter from my perspective is the absence of anything with regards to race, okay? There's not a single mention that my daughter's Black, my daughter's colored. It simply is, I'm trying to get bus transportation for my daughter. So a little bit of context for the story that follows and how it becomes constitutionally significant. In 1896, one of the most criticized Supreme Court decisions in American history, the Plessy versus Ferguson case. Homer Plessy was approximately 1/7 African-American. He could have passed easily as a white person, but it was a very orchestrated test case. They wanted to challenge the segregation laws of transportation in the state of Louisiana. So Homer Plessy boarded a train car. They knew that he was going to do this. He was arrested, and the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, with the question being, are separate but equal facilities justified as a basis for segregation? And the court, in its very famous decision, ruled that separate but equal was constitutional. Okay, as long as the facilities are separate and equal, then segregation is permitted. And this was basically reinforcing the custom of the day. Very few people were surprised by it, unlike the present. When we look back at it with horror, back then it was just, that's the way things are. The year after, Delaware amended its constitution. In this Article 10, Section 2, provision of the Delaware State Constitution stipulated that separate schools for white and colored children shall be maintained. So acting against those who wanted to see more equity and justice in the form of desegregation occur, had both federal precedent in the form of a Supreme Court decision, as well as the Delaware State Constitution, suggesting that as long as facilities are equal, separation is permitted. So if you were to visit schools in Delaware at the time, this is what they would have looked like. On the left is a field day photo at Milford School, where students are out recreating, playing, et cetera, et cetera. And on the right is one of the DuPont schools with, you see all the Black students there. So strict segregation at the time, very common. But that's about to change. So our setting is Hockessin, Delaware. I'm sure all will be familiar where it's located. This is the actual route that Shirley would have taken. If you're familiar with Limestone Road, over here in the lower right-hand corner towards the center of the screen is the Acme there. This is the big shopping center that sits there. Up here is the Walgreens and Tim's Liquors. Across here is the Hockessin Athletic Club there. And on this corner, on the left-hand side, diagonal from the Acme and Walgreens, the Bulah family had an egg stand. And they would set up the egg stand and they would sell eggs. Early in the morning, people would drive by. But also Shirley would begin her journey to school at that egg stand as well. And every day school buses would drive by and the white kids would be getting their transportation to Hockessin School 29, while the black students were forced to walk or find their own transportation. And it was legal that be the case. It was a journey of approximately 1.7 miles if you Google map it. And if you go up to where the Hockessin Fire Station is, if you don't know where this school is right near the Piedmont baseball field, right on that little road, Mill Creek Road. So several days later, after not getting a satisfactory response from the governor's office, a second letter was sent by Mr. Fred Bulah this time. And I'm not going to read the whole letter to you, but it concludes with, I seem to be getting the runaround. And the Bulahs were very frustrated in their pursuit to try and get bus transportation for their daughter. And so they're pleading now for a second time to get bus transportation. And it didn't seem like they were going to get any satisfaction out of this. So the Bulahs, not being ones to sit back and allow this to happen to their daughter, who incidentally was adopted. Miss Bulah was reading a newspaper one day and saw an article where a child had been abandoned. And she turned to her husband. They were both in their 50s, asking if they could adopt the child. And so Shirley was actually their adopted daughter. But they decided to approach the only attorney in Delaware that wasn't barred and African-American to try and see if he would take their case. So we're going to use a little graphic novel approach to this, but I want to emphasize to you that even though it appears cartoonish, everything here is grounded in the transcripts from the trial. So it's really serious, solid history that you're going to be reading about, or we're going to be talking through real quickly. So I'm going to read through the bubbles, and so you'll hear the story of what happened that followed in the interaction between Mrs. Bulah and attorney Lewis Redding. Good morning, Mr. Redding. It's an honor to meet you. Pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Bulah, what can I do for you? I live in Hockessin, where there are separate white schools for white and colored students. Yes, I'm well aware of this. So why are you here? Mr. Redding retorts. Well, the state provides white students with bus transportation to school, but they won't do this for my daughter, Shirley. So Mr. Redding turns to her and says, so you've tried to get the state to provide bus transportation? And Mrs. Bulah says, yes, I wrote to the Department of Public Instruction and the governor, and they gave us the runaround until recently when I received this letter from the state superintendent of schools. What did he say? Asked Mr. Redding. He wrote, since the state constitution requires separate educational facilities for colored and white children, your child or children may not ride on a bus serving a white school. Says Mr. Redding. So I assume you want me to get your daughter on a bus to a white school. Yes, replies Mrs. Bulah. Well, Mrs. Bulah, Redding says, if all you want is to put your daughter on a Jim Crow bus to take her to a Jim Crow school, then I'm not going to be your man to help. And so Mrs. Bulah sighs, feeling that she's not going to have her case heard. But then Mr. Redding surprises her and responds by saying, but if you're interested in trying to get your daughter into a white school, then maybe I will help. And so this is in fact taken directly from transcripts. This is exactly the language that was used. Getting your daughter into Jim Crow school, et cetera, is the language used by Lewis Redding according to the transcripts. And so Mrs. Bulah, thank God. Do you really think that this is possible that we can get this? And there's only one way to find out, says Lewis Redding. So in the fall of 1951, they took their case to the Court of Chancery, which is the court of equity in the state of Delaware. And they went before Colin Seitz, and his son now is the Chief Justice on the Delaware Supreme Court and also a board member. 3 days after the trial began, Justice Seitz did something quite unusual. He invited the attorneys and people inside the courtroom to take a field trip out to Hockessin to determine whether or not the schools, Hockessin 29, the white school, and Hockessin 107C were in fact separate, but more importantly, equal. And so students are invited to go on this sort of virtual field trip, which I can do. I can run a, if you look here on this, first of all, this is a photograph of Colin Sight Sr., the gentleman who historically, which we'll talk about in a couple seconds, handed down Delaware's decision. Hockessin School number 29 appears on the left. It's not too far from Hockessin School 107C. It's now been turned into some sort of, I think it's a Baptist community center up there. It sits up on a hill a little bit, but these are original images of the two schools. And so this virtual field trip that I do with students has them listen to the analysis of the two schools based upon the transcripts written by Colin Sights in the actual court opinion. So I could let you hear that if you want to hear it, but if you want to just move forward to it, what he does is they go back and forth comparing the different aspects of the school. So I'm going to leave it up to Roger. I see you first on the screen. Do you want to actually listen to the 6-minute sort of oral audio field trip? Or do you just want to jump to the conclusion? You're muted.
Such responsibility. We can handle it 6 minutes, I think.
Okay, seize the day. All right, so actually this is pretty odd because it's a female voice. I have two versions of this. I actually tried to get Colin Sights to do the audio portion, junior, but I had a graduate student do it for me. So it sounds a little bit bizarre being a female, but again, this is totally entirely based upon the court transcript, based upon the field trip that they took in this case. Roger, give me a thumbs up if you can, if you can hear it. You can't hear it, Roger?
No, we can't hear it yet.
You can't hear it now? No.
No.
All right.
Now it's very faint.
Try it louder.
Presiding over the case involving Shirley Bulah and her parents
Okay.
who are requesting that she
Can you hear it now?
be permitted to attend Hockessin School.
It's low, but yes.
The trial began 3 days ago, and after hearing a lot of testimony, I have now decided that a visit to the two schools will be helpful to me as I try to decide the Bulah's case. The field trip will give me a better sense of whether the opportunities for a good education are equal at the two schools. I am glad that you can join me on my field trip. Please take notes, recording what you hear and see on the handout that you have been given. I will ask you to share your written conclusions with me at the end of the field trip. Here we are. It is 1951 in Hockessin, Delaware. You see the two schools that are at the center of this case. The school on the left, Hockessin School number 29, is the school for white students. The school on the right, Hockessin School number 107, is a school for colored students. Both schools serve children in grades 1 through 6. School number 29 has 4 classrooms, 4 teachers, and serves 111 students. That means that each teacher at School 29 is responsible for approximately 28 students. School number 107 is a one-room schoolhouse, but they have divided the room with a sliding partition to create 2 classrooms for the school's 44 students and 2 teachers. That works out to be 22 students per teacher. Prior to coming, I requested information about the values of the 2 buildings and learned that the current value of school number 29 is $77,107. I've also been informed that the value of the building has actually appreciated or gone up in value. In contrast, Hockessin School number 107, the one for colored students, has actually depreciated in value and is currently valued at $13,100. Now let's check out the physical appearances of the 2 schools. Number 29 is so beautifully situated that the view immediately catches the eye. The landscaping is also outstanding. Number 107 is unlandscaped and apparently always has been. Its location just cannot compare with the location of number 29. An overall evaluation of the locations and the facilities of the 2 schools reflects such an obvious superiority in favor of number 29 as to be depressing. We also need to think about funding matters, including how much money each school receives from the state and the teacher salaries. This year, school number 29 received $178 per student from the state of Delaware, and the teachers are paid more at school 29 than at school 107. Meanwhile, the state only provided $137 per colored student attending school 107. School number 29 receives $41 more per student than school number 107. And what about the qualifications of the teachers? Documents made available indicate that teachers at school number 29 possess a superiority in formal training and are rated somewhat higher than the teachers at school number 107. Number 29 has a very attractive auditorium, as well as a basketball court, a partial basement which provides storage space and more adequate space for heating and hot water, drinking fountains, sanitary toilet facilities, and a nurse's office. Number 107 has none of these. In contrast, school number 107 has one commode in a very small room, which adjoins the space where the children's lunches, the janitorial materials, and the school drinking water bottles are kept. While number 29 has a well-equipped nurse's office, number 107 has only a first aid packet. I have learned that an expert made a comparison of the physical plants and equipment of the two schools by using the Strayer-Engelhardt scorecard. Of a maximum possible rating of 644 points, school 29 was given 594 points. School 107 received 281 points, a difference of 313. Again, out of 644 that were possible. Well, that concludes our field trip. I think it has brought to our attention very valuable information that will help me decide our case. Thank you for joining me and helping the court decide whether Hockessin schools number 29 and 107 are truly separate but equal, and whether the colored students attending school 107 have an equal opportunity to a quality education as the white students who attend school 29. This information and process should be viewed as extremely important as the futures of young people are at stake. At this time, I ask that you write down your conclusion. Are schools number 29 and 107 truly separate but equal? Please support your conclusion with evidence that we gathered during this trip.
So at this point in time, the students with the lesson write paragraphs describing whether they would argue that the two schools are separate but equal. And I can tell you, based upon this this information in this field trip, that it's pretty unanimous that they agree that it's unequal. And so did Judge Seitz believe the exact same thing. So even though he did not have the power, the authority to declare separate but equal unconstitution, as it was a federal precedent, he did have the power to issue an injunction requiring that the Bulahs be admitted into the white school. And so this formally begins the process of desegregation in the state of Delaware. What's important about this in terms of the national scene is that every year the Supreme Court gets about between 8,000 and 10,000 requests to hear cases. That's a lot of cases, 8 to 10,000 per year. And they have to sift through that. And typically in a year, courts might decide to take on anywhere from 60 to 110 cases. So the question is, what leads them to decide which cases to take on? One of the criteria is what is described in political science as percolation. And percolation means that there's disagreements in the lower courts. So maybe one state is saying or is arguing that the decision should rule in favor of the plaintiffs, whereas another state is arguing that the decision should be ruled in favor of the government. Okay, so this is what it kind of looked like at the time. Three other states and Washington, D.C. had similar cases. And in every single one of those cases, they ruled against the plaintiffs, the Bulah families types, and ruled in favor of segregation being constitutional based upon Plessy versus Ferguson. The only state that ruled in favor of the plaintiffs was the state of Delaware. And based upon this criteria of percolation, it could be argued, I think reasonably, that had it not been for Bulah, there may not have been a Brown, because there would not have been that percolation that's necessary criteria for Supreme Courts taking up case. If there's no disagreements in lower courts, then it's highly unlikely that they're going to take it on. Now, this is a little bit of an exaggeration, I would say to you, admit it, in the sense that eventually desegregation or segregation would have been ruled unconstitutional, but may not have occurred in 1954, and certainly may not have occurred with Brown as the leading the name on the Supreme Court case. But I would argue emphatically that Brown would not have been decided at the time had it not been for Delaware being the one state that stood out and sided with the plaintiffs. And kudos to the courage of Colin Seitz, who only several years previously had ruled that segregation at the University of Delaware was also unconstitutional. So all this starts with Hockessin, Delaware, a letter from parents who refuse to sit back and watch their daughter being treated unfairly in a passing school bus. Okay, this is Hockessin School 107C. If you've not been there, on the left side is the placard that the state of Delaware has posted here on the left side of the building. And what I would say to you is that our mission in part is to make sure not only that people like the Bulahs and their stories, people who are of Black African-American ancestry, are no longer marginalized in the curriculum, that kids see themselves in what they're being taught in classrooms. And, the question now for us as the current generation and future generation is, how are we going to carry on the work of the Bulahs and the students from Hockessin 107C? So with that, I'll stop and, invite any questions that you might have. And if there are none, I can turn it over to David and talk about, the future mission of the Hockessin School 107, the future vision, I should say, and perhaps even the timeline of when we hope to see things happen.
Thank you, Fran. That was great. I really appreciated the details.
No, thank you, Fran. And that I don't think you could be understated that the percolation of the Delaware case being the only one where the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the plaintiff really has a huge impact in the future of our country. And people that live in Delaware don't really realize that. So that was part of our discovery. And right now we're very excited to have the opportunity to use that story and that history as the inspiration for what happens in the future. So do you want me to talk a little bit about kind of what our plans are for the school, or anybody have any questions for Fran before we move on? Or we can do Q&A at the end, whatever you want.
And let me just add one thing. I don't want to make it look like I'm overlooking something. Many of you probably also know that at the same time the Bulah case was going on, the Belton family at Claymont was arguing a very similar case with their students. Their children were forced to attend Howard High School, and they wanted them to be able to attend the white schools in the area. And so what happened was the Belton and Bulah cases were merged. And when the Supreme Court, gave its name to the different cases, it primarily stuck with the Belton case. So Bulah kind of got stuck below the Belton case. But there were two cases in Delaware, and in both cases they sided with the plaintiffs.
Marlis?
You're on mute.
Well, you're not on mute, but we can't hear you.
Oh,
You can't hear me?
No, couldn't hear
can hear you.
Marlis.
somebody
Oh.
who we saw asking a question.
Okay, and if you want to use your raise, go ahead, Sandy.
I just, two things I want to say, and I could either say it now or at the end, but I loved what you presented, and it was just so fascinating. And I would like, and I probably speak for other people on this group, I'd love to be able to regularly find out when you have events at the school, and we would like to know how we can be involved as you continue with events and with the progress of the school. I'm just thrilled by what you're doing and learning all about this. And so if there's a mailing list we could get on or something like that, and also if you have actual things we could do to be involved at some point.
Absolutely. We would welcome that. And there's an opportunity, I'll share some things with you, but there's an opportunity on our website to join our mailing list and to volunteer. And so I'll kind of run through that a little bit, if that would be good.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Fran. That was amazing, as
That
usual.
was amazing.
I'm trying to see, I didn't see Dr. Edwards. Lynette, have you joined us yet? I know Dr. Edwards who's also a board member, is on the road right now. And she has, I'm going to almost start from the back. And just to kind of give you an idea, this is, can everybody see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So here's our board. And for those of you that know Josh Martin, he's former Superior Court judge and CEO of Verizon Delaware. His wife, Cynthia, was chair of the African American Empowerment Fund at the time that they lent the Friends of Hockessin Colored School $100,000 as part of the funds used to buy the mechanics liens from the contractor and save the property from sheriff's sale. Dr. Tony Allen, who's now president of Delaware State University, was one of the original founders of our 501c3. We're actually a public charity called the Friends of Hockessin Colored School, Inc., 107 Inc. And then this is really something that should give you goosebumps. CJ Sykes, Chancellor Sykes' son, is not only the Chief Justice of the Delaware Supreme Court, but he was also one of the key members that worked on raising the money and personally contributing money to buy the mechanics liens to avoid the sheriff's sale. And then we have Bill and Kim Allen, who were original founding members, and Fred Sears, Dick Christopher, who Dick put up $72,000 of his own money to go towards purchasing the mechanics lien, and is also president of Patterson Schwartz for many years. Drew Fennell used to be chief of staff for Governor Markell, is now chief communication and experience officer at Christiana Care. We have Sharice Brewington Carr, who's been a member for many years. Dr. Ray Blackwell, who's chief of cardiac surgery at Christiana Care. Dr. Lynette Edwards, who has had a pivotal role. Dr. Blackwell and Dr. Edwards have had pivotal roles in our board. And Dr. Edwards actually has been doing a written history of the Bulah family since Shirley went to 107 and then ultimately went to 29. And also, just as an FYI, Shirley graduated from AI DuPont High School as well. And there's a whole history behind that. And then Rohit Mathur is a local Hockessin high school senior who's on his way to college this year, who contacted us out of the blue and said, I've lived in Hockessin my whole life. I had no idea that this school was here and what its history is. And then Kiara Hill is one of my former students, a real estate graduate from Temple University, she did her capstone or her senior thesis on the colored school and also built our original website as well. So that's just a little snippet of who our team is. And to your question, Sandy, we were inclusive, adding as many members of our team as possible. So we welcome all of that activity. And just to kind of give you a little quick history, we bought the mechanics lien and saved the property from sheriff's sale in 2012. In about 2015, because the Hockessin Community Center still owned the property, we amicably worked with them to ultimately gain title to the property in 2015. And then in 2015 to 2019, we did our due diligence and research to make sure that whatever we did in the future was going to be programmatically something that would have tremendous impact in the community. And then in 2020, in August of 2020, we became partners with Newcastle County. And so the property is now the 250th park in the Newcastle County park system. And during that time, in the fall of 2020, we were also approached by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And we're currently in legislation in the US Congress, introduced by Senator Chris Coons and also by Representative Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, for our property to be designated as a National Park Service affiliate site under the Brown v. Board of Education. So Kansas, Virginia, South Carolina, DC, and Delaware, and both schools, in 3 schools in Delaware, as Fran mentioned, Claymont, Howard High School of Technology, and the Hockessin School. And then, so after we kind of said, okay, with history combined with the events of 2020, we designated and reimagined the school as a center for diversity training, inclusion, and social equity. So that's really our history. And then just in June 30th of this year, Governor Carney signed a bill where the Bond Bill Committee, or the Capital Improvement Committee, awarded our school $1 million to renovate and to reopen it again for into our diversity center. So that's kind of the history of where we've come from. The idea would be that we would, this is just some renderings of what we hope the school will look like. I'll show you a deeper floor plan, but we have almost 5 acres at the school. So we're hoping to use our outdoor space for events, for Underground Railroad commemoratives, and also for sustainable usage. But then we really get to our secret sauce, which is what's our programming going to be? And so as Fran so beautifully presented, the history of where the school fits into Brown v. Board, and also making sure that the story of the school is part of requirement for the K through 12 curriculum in Delaware schools. So that's really one of the anchors. Excuse me. The second is diversity training workshops for multiple market segments. And what do we mean? What do we mean by that? What we really mean is that, and this goes to what Sue was talking about when we started out our call tonight.
David, we don't hear you, bud. His mic's still on.
Not sure what happened.
His technology is not being nice to him tonight.
In my experience, something different goes wrong with Zoom every single time.
Yeah.
This is just this one. Fran, can you talk to the screen, or shall we wait to see if David can find his voice?
I think David would know a lot more about this than I do, to be honest with you.
Okay, all right.
I'm kind of the education guy for the board, but I know.
Yeah, I was
mean,
struck when you were talking about the Brown v. Board of Education case and the situation in Delaware. One of the things that I learned in doing some research is that the Constitution of the state of Alabama still mandates segregated schools for Black and white students. So the state Constitution of Alabama in 2021 still mandates separate Black and white schools. So
Yeah.
progress is slow in some cases.
Yeah, but I think generically speaking, I think that the building is going to become used as a place where workshops will be held to help advance the work of equity and social justice. So people will be able to come in and use the building, be trained by people who are skilled at this type of work. But as I say, he's much more familiar with the logistics behind this type of work as a real estate guy in terms of what's going on. I do know that groundbreaking could take place as early as before December of this year for this. So we're looking at a pretty quick timeline, which is pretty exciting.
I have one question. Will the original building be retained within the new plan?
That's my understanding. Yes, like they'll build within and preserve as much as possible. I've never seen the inside of it. At one point when I used to go there and just on my own and walk around the back, there was a big tarp covering the back of the building. So rain was getting in and I had no idea what the inside of the building looks like. But now I know that there's been a structure added so that, to prevent any of the water damage or weathering issues that could occur. David's coming back.
Oh, here's David.
How long ago did I drop?
Oh, about an hour.
We're just saying, as Sue Lindemann
1950, I
mentioned
believe.
earlier, and that's when we lost you.
On the talking about the contemporary social issues and community conversations, or before that?
I think how the building will be used in the future with regards to equity work.
Okay, good. So, all right, I'll try and share my screen. I am so sorry. I don't know why the, you know what, Sue? It's not allowing me to share because I just signed in again. I think I have to be made a co-host again.
Let me find you and make you.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is our programming, incorporating, did I fade out before I went through these bullets?
You're on the second bullet, diversity
Okay.
training workshops for multiple market segments.
Okay, good. So that's where we get into what we call deep equity training, which is where we would teach teachers and train teachers and company executives and members of the community on how to be culturally competent. And it's a whole area of opportunity, and it's one of the foundations of our programming strategy. And then also having the school be a place where we can convene community conversations around contemporary social issues like public safety and social justice. And right, as you're doing, Sue, and your programming, talking about racism and how do we go about improving our ability to communicate with each other in sensitive areas like that in a way that creates positive change. And then through Christiana Care, looking at providing, improving social determinants of health through increased diversity and inclusion. And then a primary teaching area of mine is infrastructure strategies for social infrastructure that will lead to formulas for creating more shared prosperity and human flourishing in our communities from a real estate and placemaking standpoint. And social infrastructure includes education, affordable housing, healthcare, social justice, entrepreneurship, government interaction. So there's a huge amount of content that we're planning to offer at the school. And from a partnership standpoint, we're partners with Newcastle County, as I mentioned. We've done a lot of work already with Red Clay Schools and Archmere and their history departments. The state of Delaware, we've had tremendous support from Senator Kuntz, Carper, and Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester. We're partnering with Delaware State University College of Business, with Temple, where I am, Christiana Care. University of Delaware, where Fran is, Johns Hopkins Carey Business School, and Bloomberg Health, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And then, just as an idea, Dr. Edwards has written a series of books about Black heroines. And they are, this one is Ride, Shirley, Ride. And Dr. Edwards also spent quite a bit of time this spring at HB DuPont, and also working with the leadership of AI DuPont. And we had Fran and Dr. Edwards and I presented at Archmere Academy in February. So we're already doing our community outreach. So that's been a lot of fun. And timeline wise, let me just take you to what our plan is. This is the most recent floor plan for the school, if you can see it. And this is the original school. I don't know if any of you have been out there, but unfortunately, before we took possession and ownership of the property from the Hockessin Community Center, they had demolished this historic rear wall for their addition. So we're going to put a new wall in here. And we're going to we've got in planning right now to do a little sound studio so that we can do national broadcasts and podcasts. This will be a multi-purpose room that will be able to be divided for all kinds of different programming. We'll have exhibits and a conference room. And obviously this is a large glass wall. It's called a nano wall that will actually lead out onto a huge patio, and the patio will have a fixed roof on it, and that patio will allow us to have indoor and outdoor space and events as well. So I think those are the major elements of what we're doing. And from a timeline standpoint, because of the support that we had at the state legislature from the governor and from the House and Senate, we have the money that we need to do the renovation and transformation of the school the way it was depicted. And we're in the permitting process right now through Newcastle County. Our construction drawings will hopefully be completed by the end of July and submitted to the county for approval. And we're hoping that we'll be able to have a formal groundbreaking sometime before or around the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter of this year, and then be completed within about a year from that time period and actually be open. So that, and then the one thing that I didn't mention, but that Fran did, is there are 6 to 8 former students that went to the Hockessin School number 107 that are still alive. And that is one of the most incredible gifts that we have. And we have Sonny Knott, Lois Johnson, Leroy Peterson, Blanche Tucker, Robert Berry, and Sonny's sister, Shirley, are 6. And many of them were in the picture that Fran shared on his presentation. But we had an event for Brown v. Board of Education Day at the school on May 17th. And I'll just share my screen again one more time, because there was a whole video taken of that event and by the governor's office, and it's on our website. So I'll just kind of take you over to our website for a moment. But it was an hour and 20 minutes, and it was really incredible. So if you look at our website, this kind of gives you the history. Right, this is Thurgood Marshall, just so you know, who worked with Lewis Redding on the Brown v. Board of Education case. So here was our Brown v. Board of Education Day. We are planning one of our community conversations around social justice and public safety with Colonel Vaughn Bond from Newcastle County And we were trying to schedule it in June, but it's probably going to wind up probably in August or September. There are 2 podcasts featuring Sunny, Leroy, and Lois, former students, that were done by NPR. And if they don't bring you to tears, nothing will. And then if we go to getting involved in I think you had asked this question about volunteering or getting involved. If you don't mind just sending your name through, we'll be able to get you involved. And this is our MLK Service Day, where we collected a ton of things from our generous neighbors and took them to the Ministry of Caring. And so, and then we have a whole events and media. So this is the partnership signing. There's a YouTube video from the August. Here is the information and the video on the Brown v. Board of Education Day. Here is the congressional legislation on the National Park Service, Hockessin Living Magazine, the signing ceremony, articles, and Delaware State Chamber of Commerce story of the school. And here's also some of the news coverage that we had from this event. So I think this is about, I'll just share this one with you, and I hope that that you'll be able to see this. Let's see. Whoops, it looks like it may have disappeared, but we wound up on Channel 3 with Yuki Washington talking about our event. So there's a ton of stuff on the website and a ton of content. And we're just really, really excited to have the opportunity to share this with all of you tonight.
Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. And what I'll do is send to everybody just to make sure they have the website address. I've spent some time going through some of those articles you mentioned, and they are amazing. And then people can maybe take more time to peruse on their own. But thank you so much for the great work you've done, for your amazing presentation tonight. And I'm very grateful for all that we've learned and all that you're doing. Anybody else want to say something quick? We usually have a pretty hard, fast ending at 8:15. And we're getting close to that. So if anybody else wants to say anything, unmute yourselves. And
well, thank you so much. And I, like Sandy and Roger, live in Hockessin, so could walk down the street and get to the school, which would, and unlike Sandy, I have not been there. So I'm really looking forward to the work that you're doing and the purpose that it would serve. I think being able to support dialogue and interaction and education is particularly important at a time like this, when there's so much division and so much work to be done. So thank you for everything that you've done. And I hope that we'll all find ways to support what's happening and to get involved.
It's one of the most fun projects because it's open arms. We welcome everyone's participation. There's no barriers at all to contributing in whatever way, where your time, your energy, your ideas, and that's why we have the website set up the way it is. We're really hoping we are on cloud 9 after the bond bill announcement of the $1 million, and we haven't even started our capital campaign yet. We're going to the foundations, because what we really have to do, and you can probably understand this, is we have to be able to have 2 types of capital to perpetuate our mission. One is capital to build for physical structures and to create the physical place. But the more important part is ongoing programming and being able to have the ability to bring Gary Howard and his team in to do the cultural competency and training the trainers and think about it. What place in the country or in the world is better positioned to teach the world how to be better when it comes to equal treatment for everyone in our world. And this is the story. This is the place where it began. And so we're cautiously optimistic that we'll gain National Park affiliate site designation, which will then just take us to the moon with that. And it really becomes a place for the community, because we're stewards. Remember, we're all volunteers, and we felt like we have this priceless asset that we had to protect and to curate into something special. And it's been a team effort, and we want that team to just grow larger together.
David,
Well,
I think Lucy had something to say there.
Sure.
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed this. Sandy had told me about it a while back. And when I compare it to the school in Baltimore City that I raised in, there's no comparison. We didn't have, we had separate schools, of course, and it stayed separate until 1954. So I really, really enjoyed these presentations. I think there was so much forward thinking about it, and where you are now is just wonderful. So I'm glad I was a part of this. And between Sandy and her husband, Roger, I'm able to hear everything you say, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank
That's
you
great.
so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
wonderful. And I will be the liaison between this group and our Peace and Justice group, and I'll keep my radar as to what's going on with you, and that way we can kind of work back and forth as is appropriate.
That'd be
And if you
great.
get a chance, Lucy, have you seen the video from the May 17th Brown v. Board of Education Day?
No, I had not.
Oh, you have a treat in store, because Sonny Knott, who is 91 years old, and he's a member of our board. He ended the event by saying, and brought everybody to tears. He said, "I only want to do one thing. I want to walk back through the door again." And that was it. We were done at that point, and that's our goal. We want Sonny to walk through, and the other students to walk back through the door again, and
Great.
that will be one of the highlights of
Yes,
a lot of our lives.
yes, indeed.
Well, thank you, David and Fran. And I just
Thank
want to
you
give
so
you
much.
a quick note about next Thursday, where we are having the head of the Newcastle County Foster Care Program speak about foster care in the county, how the program works, what the issues are, what the needs are, what the opportunities are. So it will be a really excellent program. Gathoni Marugi Jenkins of Westminster has arranged this. And so that will be our speaker next week, and we hope to see you back.
Okay.
Great. Thank you all
Thank you so much.
It was a
It was
pleasure.
wonderful.
Stay well, and we look forward to many more fun interactions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.